Hi, everybody. So I can't see you. We unfortunately can't see our online participants, but we're talking now directly to you. Welcome to this breakout group in the second Masterclass, International Best Practices, Cases of the Sustainability Journey in Arts and Cultural Institutions. So I have here with me two amazing representatives, and I'll first introduce them to you. And then we will dive into two of their presentations. And then we will have questions from you, from the online audience, and of course, a chat amongst us. We've had 2 days to mingle and to get to know each other, so I think there's going to be a great chat. First, introducing from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Ada Chen. She represents the university and the museum, the Jockey Club Museum of Climate Change. Ada is a committed strategist and educator with expertise in planning and sustainable development. She obtained her PhD at the University of Melbourne, where her dissertation examined the role of creative art spaces as cultural capital in Hong Kong and their contribution in urban sustainability. With substantial experience in academia and project management, Ada has served as the head of communications and engagement in the Social Responsibility and Sustainable Development Office, as well as the network manager for the Sustainable Development Solutions Network in Hong Kong at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. In these roles, she successfully led initiatives focused on social impact and sustainability. Additionally, she has held the position of project manager at the University of Hong Kong, where she managed community outreach projects pertaining to water sustainability. So welcome, Ada.
Thank you, Fafana.
And as for Rachel, Rachel is here from the Royal Ballet and Opera House in London. Rachel Sullivan is the environmental manager of the Royal Ballet and Opera House. Royal Ballet and Opera. Rachel is passionate about engaging with staff, artists, audiences, suppliers, and visitors to encourage discussion and promote action to reduce our impact on the environment. Rachel leads on operational and building environmental sustainability and has overall reporting responsibilities for environmental performance at RBO. As part of work to support the cultural sector in this area, Rachel contributed to the latest volume of the Theatre Green Book, is a member of the Opera Europa Sustainability Forum Committee, and has recently launched a cultural sector-wide tool to improve supplier engagement and streamline information gathering. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you very much.
I will now already pass the word to Ada, who will guide us through her first presentation.
Thank you, Giovanna. So, hi everyone online. I'm Ada from the Museum of Climate Change. So it's really our privilege to be invited by the Alliance to share our experience in terms of how we engage the public and the community through our Museum of Climate Change. And eventually, before I start to share the journey, I need to give some of the context about our museum. Our museum, as you can see from our name, it is embedded in a university. So our university, the University of Hong Kong, CUHK in short. So our university eventually treat sustainability or sustainable development as a core business in our overall planning or strategies. So that's the reason why when we founded this museum, we always want to make use of MOCC as a platform to engage the CUHK community, the public, and also global community as well. We, as CUHK, believe we embrace our social responsibility for sustainable development. So we try to use our research, community engagement, teaching to link all this together in order to tackle climate change as a very alarming issue nowadays. So that's the reason why we collaborate with the Jockey Club Charity Trust in 2013, and they give us a very generous amount of money to fund this museum. And with the vision, we want to drive change in terms of people's knowledge, attitude, and behavior. I'll further elaborate about this because it's also about how we assess the changes or impact of our museum. So remember, K stands for knowledge, A stands for attitude, and B stands for behavior. So this model is, we have been sticking to it for many years till now. So that's the reason why we always promote ourselves as the first museum of the theme of climate change. I think unlike many of the museums around the world, sustainability is something add-on to the museum or institution. But our case is quite different because from our name, you already know that sustainability is our core business. So it's not something add-on. It's not something for branding. It's our mission and vision. So what we do, we have 4 major pillars to support what we are doing. First of all is to communicate climate change. So you can imagine the message of climate change sometimes could be very scientific. It's not easy for the layman to understand all those graphs, all the maps. But what we did is try to make it more layman friendly. And the second one is to encourage or drive the climate-friendly behavior change. As I said earlier, knowledge, behavior, attitude are the core. That's how we assess our impact. And we also nurture the future leaders for sustainable development. Because we, as a tertiary institution, we educate people and youngsters. So we believe the younger generation are the core, playing a very important role in facilitate the future development. So we put a lot of resources into this area as well. The last pillar is to engage the community. Even though we are embedded at the university, but we are also open to the public. So we are trying to not just attract the visitor to visit us, but also we are going into the community to engage them. So I will go through one by one about all those pillars. First of all, when we communicate the climate change, we use a number of mediums. First of all, of course, as a museum, we have a lot of exhibitions, and no matter this is permanent or temporary. This kind of exhibition help us to give the visitors the context and as a conversation starter with the visitors. For example, we will have guided tours for the visitors. So all these tours can give a chance for the visitors to ask questions to our tour guide. And also, sometimes they will ask some very interesting questions. I remember one of the tour guide shared with me, he lead a group of kindergarten students to walk around at our museum. And suddenly we talk about, there's a part we talk about the food web in the polar region. And then we told them, oh, actually, if we have all those climate change impact, the animals in the polar region will die. And then one of the kids asked the tour guide and said, oh, if they all die, what should we do? Eventually, it's a question from his bottom of his heart. it's a very eccentric reaction, I would say. Even though, and the tour guide shared with me at that moment, he cannot answer. He couldn't respond to that because it really means that the exhibition or the tour did facilitate the kids to rethink what happened to our world. Yeah, so it's one of the examples I wanted to share. And another medium will be mobile museum. Mobile museum is very important. As I mentioned, we are thinking how to go into the community. That's a very important element that we use to go into the community. How it works is that we turn some of our exhibition into a smaller model, a very portable one, using the technology of VR and AR. So the NGOs, the schools can borrow those models from us so that they can create their own exhibition at the school. So this is how we communicate the message of climate change with the public and engage the public as well. And the last one is the virtual exhibition. We already make it online already. This virtual exhibition we developed during the COVID. So we in Hong Kong, the student couldn't come because we have no schools. And I think for more than a year, everyone is using Zoom for their classes. So we have to react to this situation. So we developed a virtual tour. So it is also, we ask our students, our tour guide, to host Zoom meeting with the school students, and then they let them go through the virtual tour. So we also make all of our temporary exhibition online as well. So it is another way to save energy. And even though it is a very short-term exhibition, we will not waste all the contents and resource, and we will still make it online to make it accessible to everyone. So this is the map of our museum. You can see the polar bears at the corner. I forgot to introduce him. He is PB, our mascot of our museum. So you will see him everywhere in our museum. In our museum, we have 5 different sections. So we use a narrative approach to teach the visitors how to go through the journey of a polar region or as a citizens. So first of all, in the Polar Gallery, we will talk about how climate change affecting the polar regions. And then we will use, the second part is the remote sensing region. So we use the technology of remote sensing to teach the visitors how to interpret the data and how climate change impacts our life in terms of health, in terms of our daily living. And the third part is our CUHK innovation section. So we collaborate with our scholars and collect some of their innovations and then put it in this part. Most of the innovations are addressing the climate change issues. And then the fourth part will be the Green Gallery. Green Gallery is showcasing some of our donors' projects related to waste management or some kind of education program, etc. The last part is a very important part, and we go through a very practical journey that they will go through what's the impact of climate change to our life, how we use technology to tackle it, and then how we engage the community. And the last part is about they will give a pledge to make a pledge at our station there. And then they use to give them a message that they can, from their personal experience or personal level, they can do something to save the world. That's how our exhibition goes. And the second one is to drive the climate-friendly behavioral change. So there's two very important programs. I just mentioned about the community climate pledge. Eventually, it's a portal or it's a platform for the visitor to make a pledge. We have several actions that you can help reducing carbon emission for them to choose. And then they can take photo. The photo will send it back to their emails, and we will calculate it to convert it back to the action contribute to how many carbon emission. So we also have a school program to promote climate-friendly diets. For nurturing the future sustainability leaders, MOCC Ambassadors is one of our flagship programs to train our COHK students to be the tour guide and also to familiarize the operation in the museum. They help us to operate the museum. The MOCC Scholar is linked to the ambassador because it's a concept of passing the torch. So the scholars are eventually the alumni of the MOCC ambassadors. So they will continue their journeys and giving back to the museum as well as the university. And lastly, to engage community. Locally, we engage a lot of NGOs in organizing or even academic department within our university to be more environmentally conscious. And globally, we organize different conferences related to sustainability or climate change, also joining different international alliance like Culture for the Planet and also Sustainable Development Solution Networks. So I think that's all. I didn't cover a lot of operation side, but I would love to share more if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ada. I'll pass the word now to Rachel, and then we open for questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was going to say, can you move on to the next slide? But it's me, isn't it? There we go. Right, hello everybody out there. I'm Rachel O'Sullivan. I'm the Environmental Manager at the Royal Ballet and Opera. Oh, sorry, is that better? Okay, sorry. So I'm Rachel, I'm the Environmental Manager at the Royal Ballet and Opera. And my, as the Environmental Manager, my focus is very much on the environmental side of things. So when Giovanna asked me to speak, I was thinking, what areas are we showing best practice in that are actually going to be relevant that are across sustainability, and I couldn't decide between two, so I'm going to try and fit two things into my 10 minutes, so I'm sorry if I talk too fast or gloss over the detail. But just to give you a tiny bit of a summary of where of who the Royal Ballet and Opera are, we are based in Covent Garden in London. We have 3 buildings. We have our iconic Royal Opera House that people may know if they have come to London. It's a historic Grade 1 listed building. And then we have a warehouse storing our sets and scenery in Wales. And then we have our scenic workshops, which are in Essex. We've got 2 stages in Covent Garden. We have around about 3,000 staff, artists, contractors and freelancers. That's quite a lot of people. And we have around about 1 million annual visitors. I've put on this slide our 2 environmental policy ambitions, and this was one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. So the first ambition in our environmental policy is that we will achieve net zero for scopes 1 and 2 by 2035. And that's a lot of words. And when you say that to the public and general people, they go, and then you watch them glaze over. So what that really means is that we're going to try to reduce our gas and electricity consumption as much as we possibly can by 2035, and then we'll offset the rest. And our other ambition is that we will achieve, our other thing that I need to tell you about is that we have basic certification for the Theatre Green Book. So I need to move on to the next slide before I explain that bit a little bit more. So when I first started this job, so I've been in the job for about 3.5 years. And when I came in, there was already an existing environmental policy, which my predecessor had written and worked very hard to make sure was achievable. And that was net zero for scopes 1 and 2. But she'd also included the line, and we will set targets for scope 3 by 2025 this year. So if you do environmental as part of your sustainability scope, you'll know that setting a target for scope 3 is basically impossible. So scope 3 is everything else. So not your gas or electricity, things that you energy use, you consume yourself, but it includes waste, business travel, audience travel, who you're buying from, who you are selling to, what products you're selling. It's enormous. It's absolutely massive. And I totally get why she put this line in, because she was hoping that by 2025 we'd have a bit more of an idea of how to do that. And we don't. So when I knew that this was coming, and so we worked for a couple of years beforehand to decide what we were going to do. And instead, we tried some trial targets, we tried all sorts of things, and it wasn't really successful. So what we have done now is to remove that reference to scope 3 and instead just talk about the Theatre Green Book. So if you're not in the theatre sector, you may not have come across this, but it's a step-by-step guide for theatres to become more sustainable. So it's really practical. It just lists all the things that you could do. It doesn't say you have to do them, but it gives you overall standards that you should be achieving if you're at these particular levels, and it gives you ideas of what to do. I'll go back. No, can't go back. Okay, I'll just leave on this one. Anyway, we chose to go with the Theatre Green Book rather than talking about net zero because it was more holistic. So we were very much getting bogged down in the carbon numbers, and we are not the kind of we do deal with a lot of numbers, but we're in the cultural sector, we deal in stories. We're much better at storytelling and taking practical action. So rather than spending all of our time putting in effort to gathering those numbers and verifying them and making sure that we were putting them in the right tools, we wanted to focus that finance and those efforts on actually taking action, creating stories of change. And we felt that the Theatre Green Book was a much better vessel for us to be doing that with. It's still accountable, it's still certifiable, lots of plus points to it. So that's what we decided to do with the policy. But me deciding to do that and us actually being able to do that as an organisation is a very different thing. So once myself and Sarah and others who are involved in making that decision had thought, okay, we'd like us to go in this direction, we then needed to get everyone on board. So we started at the top, because if you don't have management buy-in, then you can't really do anything practically. So we took it to our next level up, to our managers, and they agreed that it was the way that we should be going and how were we going to get everyone on board with that. And it was recommended that we use a pick a column. So what this is it's a really simple but really effective way of putting an argument across. So in column 1, you consider what life would be like if you left everything as it was. So leaving the policy as it is with some additional goals. How would that feel? How would that look? What would we need to do? What are the actual specifics of just staying as it was? And then in column 4, you say, okay, what would it look and feel and be like practically to work here if we have committed to achieving the Theatre Green Book, we've committed to that with dates, we've put our financial backing on it, we're emotionally behind this. And then you fill in the bits in between. So 2 is kind of a little bit better than just as is, and 3 is not quite as good as your perfect, not perfect, but you're striving for best practice. And we wrote down and we went through in very practical terms what this is going to mean for us. We really did a big thought experiment on how is this going to be, what will life be like here. And then we presented all of that to our direct managers, and they said, we don't think that there's anything in column 4 that we couldn't convince everybody to do. So that's what we did. We just took away the others, didn't give them the option, and said to our managers, or said to our CEO and the board, this is how it would feel to work here. Do you want to work here? And they said, we would love everybody to work here. This sounds like, why wouldn't you want to go for that? Why wouldn't you want to choose a life that is better for everyone, that we're not affecting the planet every time we put on a production? Like, why would you not choose to try and do better, basically? So we got management buy-in, which was great. And now we have to get the entire organisation in. So one of the most important things about sustainability is that it's everybody's problem. Everybody needs to integrate sustainability into what they do. So we have a team of 2 at the Royal Ballet and Opera, which is massive in comparison to most theatres who are usually have less than half a person to deal with sustainability. But we cannot be in every location. We can't be in the kitchens telling people that they need to reduce the amount of food waste. We can't be in every production meeting. We've got to make sure that our teams are doing this for us. We are there literally just to facilitate and to train and to help and support. So we are trying to get individuals to make sure that they know what they can do, and we're doing that through workshops, meeting every team and saying, what is it that you feel that you can do? How can we support you? What are your targets? What are your plans? Making sure that they know about the Theatre Green Book, where they know where they can get their support from. And then we are also helping them to communicate with each other. So we find that teams are doing fantastic things and nobody really knows that they're doing them, or it's just sort of gone under the radar. So we've put together a report, which we're now going to try and change the name of and not call it a report, but call it some kind of celebration of our successes or something. But we're drawing all of that into one place so that people can go, oh, I didn't know we had an enormous costume sale that meant that we rehomed 10,000 costumes rather than sending them to fabric recycling. We want all of those things to be celebrated, and we want to do that in a way that people can use that resource themselves and then pass that on to other parts of the organisation or other places where they talk about what we're doing externally. And then this is the other thing that I wanted to talk about. So that was all a really positive thing that we're doing internally, but we are the cultural sector. We have a really wide reach, and we don't have climate change in our title, and it isn't what we do. We create ballet and opera, but we are so responsible for affecting how people think and people take action. So we looked at talking to our audiences, and we have started in that process, but the thing that I wanted to talk to you about today was our supply chain. So who we work with, we have 1,500 suppliers a year. And if we can encourage that web of suppliers to become more sustainable, then we're having an enormous reach. So we followed the standard protocol of how you're supposed to start your Scope 3 supply chain work. And we did a cost assessment, we did I'm going to go through really fast then. So we did a cost assessment, and then we started to try and get individual data from each of our different suppliers. We did that by surveying, and we got very varied responses. So we decided to bring together as many of our key suppliers as we could in conversation. So we called it a workshop, but it was basically a chat. And we said, talk about your challenges, talk about the successes, so you could share successes, but also tell us what we can do to help you. And one of the things that they said was, everyone is starting to ask us questions, and that's brilliant, but everyone is giving us a different form to fill in, or they've got different bespoke requirements. What we really want to do is for you to ask us the same questions and us just answer them once. And that's that for the year. So that's what we have done. So we have worked with other theatres, other museums. We've worked with Julie's Bicycle and Arts Council England to create a single form with all of the questions that we think that are probably most relevant to the cultural sector. And we've put them all together into one really super simple Google form. the supplier fills that form in once. It gets sent through to us and we put it onto a spreadsheet that's publicly available, and then organisations within the cultural sector can go to that spreadsheet and all of that information is there for them. So they don't have to sit. I've sat for hours in front of Google searching for supplier information that it just isn't there. So this was the intention of this was to try to bring all of that information together in one place, and for suppliers just to be able to say, okay, I filled in this form, here are my answers, thank you very much. You can go away now and stop asking me all these questions. So, but the main aim of doing this, although it is to save everyone time and money and get all that information available, is for us to then say, okay, you've filled in this form, you've got some things where you've answered no. Maybe you could look at how you're going to improve that. And maybe next time you fill in that form, you will have an environmental policy. Or maybe next time you will have set some goals. So that although you might already be asking these questions to your suppliers, I think the most important thing is that you keep going back every year and you keep expecting change. Because if you are pushing your suppliers, they want you to still be your client. You have power. So if you keep asking, then they will keep progressing and it will move much more of society forwards in trying to become more sustainable. There we go. That's it.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think it's so interesting to see so different organizations, but at the same time, some things that come together with both of your speeches. And I think we spent 2 days together launching the Alliance. Now that I didn't even introduce myself, but I'm Giovanna, and I'm the strategy lead for Culture for the Planet. And I've already received a lot of interesting questions from the chat. But before we jump to the chat questions, there's something that I think is very interesting for the Alliance and for us, which is always understanding what we can learn from each other. So I think that this is a question for both of you in the sense of, from what Ada has presented, what for you Rachel has talked, and what you will bring back as an opera house and not a museum, and what from you Ada have you heard from Rachel as an opera house that you can bring back to sort of start this sectorial conversation going.
Well, can I start? Because I have a really good one. So okay. I had lunch with Ada yesterday, and she's obviously a communications expert, and she said, "Don't call it a report. People don't read reports," and I think that's so true. I think the language we use is super important, and I mean, there's an awful lot of jargon in sustainability as it is. So making sure that you are choosing language that people can connect with is really important. But I think that was a fundamental moment for me, is that you're right. Like, I wouldn't read a report, but actually I know that I obviously do read reports, but if I'm not going to read it if I don't think it's going to be relevant to me. And I've been so careful with the language that I've used when I was writing this celebration, and so careful that I was telling stories. But I've totally switched people off with that title of the Environmental Sustainability Report 24-25. Like, ugh. But yeah, just how you pitch it to somebody is so key, and definitely going to change that. So thanks very much.
Okay. I ride on what Rachel said and supplement a bit. Eventually, we no longer, from CUHK context, we no longer call it a sustainability report for 4 years already. We call it SD Matters. That means sustainable development matters to every one of you in the community or in CUHK. So it's easier for the audience or the readers to get into open the report and then read the details. Because when you call it sustainability report, you can imagine it's autographs and figures. How do I relate it to that? Yeah, that's the reason why we changed the name. It's also part of our branding as well. Because at that time, we started to use SDGs as our strategy framework. So in terms of not only the name, also the color we use, the verse we use, how we structure the report, we also use SDGs. Yeah, that's the story I didn't tell you. Yeah, and go back to what Giovanna's questions is. What I learned from Rachel's presentation is that I think a systematic or information sharing is very important. Yeah, because in university context, we do have a lot of information and data, but transparency could be improved. And also, that's the reason why we are planning to have a platform for other units which related to sustainability to share our data or information with us. Yeah, that's the way we are planning to do. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll jump into a question that came from the chat that I think speaks to the first point about communication that is quite interesting. So Anna Paul from reflector.co, she says it's very interesting and thanks you. And then she says, one topic that often comes up in our work is how regular museums or opera houses and etc. and other cultural organizations can communicate about their sustainability to their audience in a credible way. And she also adds, and also to involve them in discussions and solution finding processes.
Well, I can start on this if you want. So this is something that I'm not saying we are perfect at, but we are definitely on a journey of getting better at communicating how we talk about sustainability. So when I first started in the role, I was really, I felt it was really important to tell our audiences about all the great things that we were doing, because if you talk about it, then you can encourage others to make change as well. And we are in the first program that I was involved in helping to put together. I put in a sustainability article, and I talked about boilers, and I talked about our emissions targets, and so dry. And I have very much learned from that experience of we are storytellers. So now we have regular meetings with our communications team, and we incorporate sustainability into our natural communications. So we have on Instagram and on our reels and that sort of thing, we will talk about how our costumes are stored, and we have a rep model. So you put on a show and then everything gets stored, and then when it comes back, you are fixing those costumes, so you're repairing them. So we've got shows that are 50 years old, and the costumes are still original. They are, if you look up super close, you can see that they're patched, but if you see them on the stage, they look as perfect as the day that they were there. So, and that is an amazing sustainability story, but it's still about our core art form. It's still, it's making sustainability part of our everyday rather than the bolt-on. It's the thing that captures people's imaginations rather than telling them about our boilers, which is important, but probably to a fairly niche audience.
I love, just commenting on that before moving on to you, Ada, the picture that I saw that you once posted of the outside the hall, that you had like a huge sculpture of the dresses or some sort of, and it's a gorgeous way to also bring this conversation to people.
Yeah, our Christmas tree is made of old tutus. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's such a nice idea, and it's so gorgeous, and it talks about sustainability, but in a fun way, in a way that makes sense to the audience, and I think that's super interesting.
I think in our context, how we improve communications in terms of sustainability is, I will talk about the problem we are now facing first, because our audience, the range is quite large. So we have elderlies, we have kindergarten students, we have all families, this kind of stuff. So all those audience are different. So how we come up with a very effective communication tool is difficult. So the only way we can do is to, of course, we use social media, but social media nowadays is not that effective. Eventually, because Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they no longer use Facebook, IG. Maybe they will take a look at TikToks or Reels, this kind of media. Whereas if you, for a social media post, if you got a very long one, eventually no one will read. Yeah. So the way we do is try to catch up the pace. So we schedule the posts regularly so that we can catch a certain group of audience. For example, for Friday night, we will catch most of the audience because for adults, they off work. They have time to read all those social medias and so on. But for kids, weekends, we can catch their peak real time as well. So social media itself, we have to compete with the social media actually nowadays. And for views, we take longer time to produce it because we would like to make it more informational so that within 30 seconds you can catch at least one takeaway message from it. And the second part of the question is about the solution finding process. For the solution finding process, I think we are lucky because we are from a university. So we always have different initiatives collaborate with our academics in the university. So we used to have different kind of project related to, for example, biodiversity, food management, this kind of stuff. And we also leverage the resource from the network, like Sustainable Development Solutions Network. We connected with other non-profit making organizations as well as other research institutions all around the world to come up with some kind of collaboration on that. Yeah.
Thank you. We've receiving a lot of questions, which is great. I wish I could address them all, but I'm seeing a common thread amongst them, which is something about audiences and programming. So cultural spaces are spaces like you mentioned, right? There's storytelling. You're there to tell stories, to create narratives. So I think one question is, how do you mobilize? How do you, of course, we talk about sustainability inside the environmental, in the backstage and the operations, but how do you also bring that to the artistic presence of your organizations? Well, I guess for Ada is already part of the where you are about, but then for you maybe to express how education is so intrinsic to what you do at the Museum of Climate Change and the role with ambassadors and new people. So more, how would you get your message through to this audience and to train and educate these ambassadors of the future?
I think nowadays we change a little bit. We not exactly change, but we add on something, is to focus on people with special needs. Last year we launched an initiative called Inclusive Museum. So what is this? It's about we develop education materials for, at that moment, it's for the visually impaired visitors. At the same time, we also developed our audio tour. We developed our audio tour guide to cater those who are not really okay with the visual or not with words. Yeah, because in university setting or education institution settings, we have a lot of students with special education needs. So we are training our ambassador to know more about what they need, so that they can, when they give the tour, they will know how to adjust the content of the guided tour. Yeah.
So, in terms of talking about sustainability in kind of our artistic provision, so I don't know how it works in other opera houses, but certainly at the Royal Ballet and Opera, we are scheduling and planning for what shows are going to be on 5 years ahead of time. So what you're seeing on our stages now was planned during COVID, basically. So we are a slow-moving vessel in terms of what goes on to our stages, in terms of the main stage. But that doesn't mean that we aren't working in this area. So we have a second stage called the Limbury stage, which is much more agile and tends to be used for more modern productions or for new productions. We still have new ones on the main stage, but we are more agile in the Limbury. And certainly there is an increasing focus on talking to our new commissions about climate change themes and themes of imagining what future life could be. Certainly last year we were looking at commissioning something, and we had received 3 proposals, and not through our instigation, but all 3 of them included climate change as some sort of element for them. So this is definitely something that artists are wanting to talk about and we want to put on, but you also have to make sure that what you're putting on is going to be something that people want to see, and is obviously of really high artistic quality. As well as doing that, we're also working with our creative teams, so our the directors, the costume and set designers, and they're all external, they're all freelancers, and we are trying to engage with them at the moment to talk about sustainability and how they can make their productions more sustainable. So not necessarily affecting or changing their storylines, but making them think about, asking them to think about how they can integrate sustainable thinking into their design process. So for example, working on modular scenery. So we can say, okay, we've got all of this, so the things like stretch frames and inlays and infills, and these are things that hold the sets and scenery up behind the scenes, are usually made of wood and steel, so highly environmentally intensive, but you can't see them. So would there be any problem in us using the same thing on, say, 3 or 4 different productions, or just ongoing, if you could just make your design so that it will be sort of 3 centimetres smaller, so that it will fit onto this kind of thing? And it's working with designers and creatives to understand what it is that we can do to help them make their designs more sustainable, but without affecting the artistic content or their integrity or the visualization of what they want to create. So I think there's a definite 2 strands to that working with artists. It's the what are we putting on our stages and talking to our audiences about, but also how have we made that production in the first place, and how have we integrated that into that planning process.
And I think there's something very interesting that you said that stuck out to me, which is the 3 sort of pressures, if I may use this word, in the sense that there's, or at least leaderships, and there's the artist that may pressure to sustainability, there's also you as the organization that can pressure, but there's also the needs of the audience. And so I would always say that it depends on the institution and the social and political context, of course, but it's interesting to see how these 3 different dimensions push towards more and more sustainability, artistic practices and programming, but also the practices of the operations team. Ada, you want to comment?
I think for MOCC itself, nowadays we are not only doing our own things. like we will collaborate with others. Like last year, we did an exhibition collaborating with local artists to raise for fundraising and improve the authenticity or artistic level of our exhibition. So this kind of collaboration enhance our message communication in some way, yeah. So I believe in the past we also collaborated with theatre to develop a climate change drama for the school kids. And it's also another very successful story because nowadays many others NGOs in Hong Kong also develop similar sets of drama, which is very interactive. You, as a visitor or audience, you can really immerse in the drama and then choose the way how the story develop for the character in the drama. So this kind of stuff is really emerging. Not only what we always say, oh, we need to have a immersive exhibition. It's not necessary. Things can be very simple but very impactful. Yeah.
I think that's impactful, right? It's such a important word when we're talking about talking to audiences and everything, but going back to something that was also in both of your presentations, which is the internal audiences. We had a lot of questions inside of also the bottom up that you mentioned and the top down, but also how do you engage the internal audience of your institutions to really start talking about sustainability and to talk about climate change, to talk about the environmental sustainability? How do you engage the different teams that are needed to make things happen inside the organization?
Oh, that is a big question, Giovanna.
I can go first.
No, but I think it's the vital question, isn't it? That's if you haven't got everybody on board, because as I said, you need everybody to do it. But I'll let you go first, Ada, if you.
Okay, sure. Nowadays, we work with our human resource office. They regularly offer some of the training programs for our new staff. So we collaborate with our human resource office to offer tours for our new staff. So that's the one way to engage our CHK community. And also we have funding to fund projects, which is initiated by by either students or staff. We not a very big amount of money, but at least they can run something like recycling program in the campus, in the museums, or education program or outreach program related to elderlies, this kind of stuff. Not necessarily related to climate change, but all things related to sustainability are welcome. So these kind of small things add up together can be very effective. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think with us, it's definitely a little and often approach. So we do the training when staff first arrive. So they have 10 minutes of listening to me talking very enthusiastically about why they need to engage with us. But we try to tackle it at all different levels as well. So we give reports to our board on a regular basis. We try to get involved in as many meetings as possible to make sure that people are talking about sustainability as one of the things as part of their line items. But we include, so there's a house-wide staff newsletter, and we make sure that we have something in there that's interesting or engaging, as usually a story of some sort, so that every week people are being talked to about sustainability, but in a way that's different and interesting each time. Although at the moment we're doing a series of energy saving tips, which is going down quite well because quite often they're transferable to home as well. So making sure that people know that this is relevant to them is really important. And we're doing the workshops. And we also try to do fun stuff as well. So, for example, we've done a bookbinding workshop where we were using scrap paper and learning how to make Christmas presents for people by like making books. We had a scrunchie making workshop. We do a plant bring in swap and shop, we call them, and we do the same with clothes. And it's a way of doing something that will help people be more sustainable, but without being too in your face about it, being fun. And also, so when I did the plant swap and shop, it was so wonderful. So I was sat there just to explain what I was doing, sat in the canteen surrounded by plants. But people were bringing me their seeds and their offcuts. And I saw so many pictures of people's gardens and people's office windows that were like covered in houseplants. And so many people saying, well, this is, like, we had trees, people brought in tiny saplings. And the number of conversations that people then had about nature was fantastic. And it was going on throughout the canteen. And normally we wouldn't, I mean, we're in the centre of London, it's quite difficult to see a tree. So having those conversations and making people connect about those things and talk about themselves as people was, it just instills, it makes it become part of the culture, which I think it is the really important thing, because once you get everyone into that frame of mind, then it becomes much easier, and they're much more open to those communications that are less interesting but might be important, like make sure you put stuff in the right bin, because then people realise that it's about them, and it's about how we operate as an organisation, and that these things are important for them to be doing.
Thank you. I know that we have a lot of other questions on the online chat, but I will have to go towards our last question already, unfortunately. I feel like we could have stayed days talking about this. You know, we're all very passionate about the topic, and we have so much to learn, but also so much to share. But I really liked one of the questions that was sent here, which is looking to the future, looking ahead. It's a very leading question in the sense it's a very interesting question. It's also a big question. But what might a sustainable cultural institution look like in 2035? What would have changed the most? But maybe perhaps to bring us to the future and say, what do we idealize? What do you feel like, where do we want to get?
Well, I can tell you that for us because I've written it down.
Right?
Well, I can't remember it specifically now. But it's basically a place where the people who work there feel that they have the empowerment and the space and hopefully a little bit of financial support to be able to ask questions and to question whether what we are doing is the best thing in terms of sustainability. It's where the executive team ask the question automatically, is this the best way that we can be doing this for the planet and for the people? And it's where we are encouraging our audiences to think about their own choices. And it's where we are creating a cultural venue where people know that they can come and be safe and to have these ideas and have these conversations and ask these questions. And it would be a paradise of people being able to talk about this and share ideas and share successes and imagine a really positive future and know that they're supported in talking about that. And in realistic terms, obviously that's all going to be related to constraints of geopolitical, global, financial, but it's where you have the space and the power to be able to make those questions and understand what is feasible and to take forward the things that are best for everybody.
For me, I have 2 points. The first point is making, as a cultural institution, making sustainability as your core business. As I mentioned earlier, many of us started our sustainability journey already, but still something very, how to say, it's not so superficial, but still thinking, waste reduction, how to do recycling, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of the policy framework or strategies of the institution itself, how you engineer sustainability into that strategies is very important. Because that's the lesson from CHK and MOCC as well. If without those drivers or framework to guide under the theme of sustainability, you couldn't do anything. Yeah, we only stop at the level of talking about net zero carbon emission, this kind of stuff. I'm not saying those stuff are not important, because everyone is saying, we need to achieve carbon neutrality, net zero. Those things are very important. But sustainability is more than that. Yeah, that's what I learned from it. And the second point is museum itself or theater is a building. But in the future, I can imagine, should be without four walls. Yeah. We should go into the community, because for sustainability itself, you couldn't just in-house. It's not an in-house work. It's everyone's job. Yeah, you cannot just rely on what Rachel or her team is doing and work on it very hardly, but outside world is doing their own thing. It's impossible. So I can imagine the future we have to destroy all those walls so that we could more engage with the community. Yeah.
I think this is such a nice way to close, in the sense that when we talk about sustainability, we talk about people, we talk about communities. And I think it's a lovely way that when we talk about the future, that is what is central in both of what you guys shared. So thank you so much. And I think this holistic way to see sustainability is really what drives Culture for the Planet as well, in the sense that we're not only tackling, like Professor Martin Müller shared before, just environmental, just the social, just the governments, but it really is an overall shoot. And I think here is just a little pill of what we're doing and what our community is going to start to do now that we launched the Alliance. And so I thank you both so very much for our panel. And as we wrap up, I call Professor Martin Müller to do a brief wrap up for our online participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, hello everybody, and I feel very energized, but at the same time also overwhelmed by the number of things I've heard. And I was really excited to hear both Ada and Rachel really take us into your institutions. And I think that's something as Culture for the Planet where we cannot do right, and we benefit from this enormously. And everybody who has been listening here has benefited from this enormously. I will try to wrap up the session, and I want to wrap it up really by giving flashlights. And I've prepared a total of 7 flashlights, so they're going to be very short. I think one thing I've taken away from today, but also from the input of you two here, is that you can start small to then grow big. And that you even need to start small to grow big. You start engagement, you start where you are, and you take it from there. And then you can create a movement. So although sustainability can feel overwhelming, you start somewhere, and then you get going and you get moving. So first flashlight. The second for me is you can start in many places. There's no one right place to start. And where you start depends much on what organization you're in, what country you're in, perhaps what sector you're in. And I particularly liked, Ada, when you said that sustainability is more than carbon. This coming from you, Climate Change Museum, it's very encouraging because it's right. And sometimes we have this tunnel view. Carbon is extremely important. It's one of the most important challenges, but it's not the only one, right? Which makes both more difficult, but it makes it easier to get started if you don't want to start on the big carbon chunk of things. Third is an issue that came up again and again also this morning in particular on the number of resources. I think that's, if there's one recurring topic, it's this one, the culture sector. And I would like to encourage a change of perspective towards asking, how can we create value through sustainability? How is not just a cost, but it's an investment item? And I think this is not just about, it's about communicating to whoever is supposed to give money, also to the audience, internally, to management. And that means also that there's a return to sustainability. If there's an investment, it's a return. Cost means that money's gone. Investment means there's something coming back. Maybe there's even money coming back, but it's something at least. And in turn, in connection with this, there's also the chance to see sustainability as a source of revenue, actually, in terms of partnering, in terms of finding sponsors, in terms of actually activating new sources of revenue that are out there, because there are many sponsors, institutions that are waiting for great projects and great institutions to work with. So in that sense, I want to send here a message of encouragement also that it can open new sources of funding as well. The fourth flashlight, the internal question of should be bottom up or top down. I think the clear message that I've heard for today is it's both. It needs to be both. Without the bottom up, you're never going to have the transversal reach across the organization that you need for sustainability. But without the top down, you're probably not going to have the long term and the major impact that you also want to have if you're in for the long term, as you have to be in sustainability. Fifth flashlight is one that I think was implicit throughout the day today, and that is on the question of, but is sustainability not lots about things we can't do, but putting additional constraints on a sector that really appreciates freedom and protects artistic freedom of creation more than anything else? I think that's a big question that has many different angles, but I think one take I want to have on this is that some constraints can also drive creativity, and creativity can thrive on some constraints. If you think of improvisation, which is an art form in itself, improvisation is not just free play of thoughts, but it also always has some constraints. In theater, improvisation gives you, give 3 keywords, and those are the constraints around which improvisation happens. So I think I also like to think around constraints as potential for creating new imaginations and new content. Sixth point is a point that we've been struggling with in organizing the summit. It's one that is in many people's minds, because as soon as you work globally, it's also a question of when do you board an airplane, and with what kind of mood do you board that airplane? Do you have flight shame? Do you feel like you really shouldn't do this? And our answer to this has been a twofold answer. One is that if you do your sustainability planning well, you will probably have a carbon budget, and you probably will know whether that flight is within the carbon budget or is not. But at least it gives you an in-between position, which is the in-between position between saying, okay, I fly everywhere I can, or I don't fly at all, which are kind of almost the extremes that we have at the moment, right? But it gives you a way of having a constraint, going back to the constraints, and saying, okay, within the budget I have, where do I fly, and what are the important things that I want to do? And again, going back to the idea of investment, that there are good flights and less good flights. And I think good flights are also those that, in the long run, contribute to the sustainability transition. And I hope that we've done for this summit good flights, most of all. And the last point, and then I'm going to finish for the online group. I think there's sometimes, in the morning certainly, sometimes there was a bit of feeling of, we're so small, what can we change? What difference does it make anyway, whatever we do? And this is where what Rachel said really resonated with me, that incredible reach, right, that cultural institutions have. And I think it's a question of really realizing that reach. And the first step perhaps is, getting your house in order internally, getting the dirty laundry away and making sure that this is taken care of. But then you can focus your energies and your attention on really working with that reach and working with the leverage that cultural institutions have. And if the motto of the summit is one voice, one sector, one voice, it's also a voice that should carry beyond the sector. And I think this is where this message of reach is a really important one that I take away. So I would like to thank you for contributing, also the panelists in the morning, and everybody online with your excellent questions that we couldn't even take all. We would have loved to. So stay with us, not now. Now you can say goodbye, but in the long run of the journey, you have the slide up here where you can find us and follow us. And we hope to hear more of you and also see some of you in person in the future going forward. Thank you. So welcome back, everybody. We already did the wrap-up with the online audience, and now we are really only here in this room, which, if you're standing up here, it makes for a different feel. If you didn't know that there are not another 60 people online listening to you. So there, we just want to not only leave you with those different impressions that you got from the workshops, where you looked deep down into some practices by some institutions that come from different parts of the world, from different parts of the sector as well, that are focused on different elements of their sustainability journey. But we also want to try and wrap this up a little bit. And the way we've chosen to do this is in flashlights, very short flashlights that I'll provide. Kind of a summary of what I've heard through the day, and basically also giving you some elements to think through, some provocations, little provocations going forward, and maybe takeaways that you can use in your own practice, wherever you come from, in whatever institution or context you work, you study, or you find yourself in your life. And those are 7 flashlights. And the first one, for me, is that you start small to then grow big with sustainability. You start the engagement, you create a movement, you build a base, and then you take it from there. Although sustainability can often feel overwhelming, if you see the sustainability star, the 20 dimensions, the different definitions, the different approaches, one lesson that I take away, having listened to also the workshops, is that you start from where you are, and then you become more systematic as you go along. And the second flashlight is that you can start in many places. I was here with the online group, and there was Ada Chan from the Museum of Climate Change in Hong Kong with us. And she said something that stuck with me. She said, sustainability is more than carbon. And what she meant is obviously not that carbon is not important. Carbon and climate change are a key issue today. But it also means that when you start your sustainability journey, there are different starting points. And yes, you do need to worry about climate at some point, but maybe that's not where you need to start. You start where you're good at, where you have energy, and you take it from there to then broaden out and make it more systematic. The third flashlight I want to give is around this common theme that we've heard emerge today, which is around the need to have more resources, more money. And I want to perhaps switch the perspective a little bit on this. Of course, it's always good to have more resources. But what if there can't be more resources through the typical channels? Well, I would suggest that we start thinking of sustainability a little bit differently, not just as a cost, as an additional expense item, but as an investment. An investment is something that creates a return. And often people are much more willing to give money for an investment rather than for something that presents an additional cost. Now, what that return of sustainability can be is, of course, very multiple. We can say maybe there's an immaterial return, a social return, maybe there's a community return, maybe there's even a financial return to sustainability. And to take that point even a bit further, you can think of sustainability as a source of revenue, as being able to tap into revenues and work with funders that you might not have worked with before. There are often funders out there, private funders, public ones, big and small enterprises that might not have sponsored culture before, that are very interested in working on specific sustainability topics, and that can constitute a new source of revenue, but also a new source of competence that you can activate working with those new partners. So the big chance of sustainability, because it is so wide and cross-cutting, is that it can also help you build new partnerships, acquire new competencies, widen your impact, and also acquire new funds. Fourth flashlight, the eternal question that came up throughout this morning, is it bottom-up or top-down? And the answer to this, I think, is that it's both. Sustainability needs to be bottom-up because it's transversal. You need to take everybody along. It can't just stay in one corner of your organization. But it also needs to be top-down because the top-down gives it a long-term perspective. It also gives it importance in the strategy, and it also gives it a long-term funding perspective. So the two need to come together, really. It can't be either one or the other. Number 5. Sustainability means at least some additional constraints. And that, of course, asks the question of how those constraints can be squared or combined with freedom of expression and creation that are at the heart of the arts and cultural world. And this is an important question that would take hours to discuss. But I would like to encourage perhaps a different take on those constraints. I would like to encourage a perspective that can see creativity as thriving on constraints. Constraints can actually be sources of creativity. Just think of improvisation in the arts, improvisational theater, for example, which needs constraints, 3 keywords, for example, to then build on those constraints to create. And one of those constraints, and that's the 6th highlight, is of course a question of carbon budgets. If we are to honor the Paris Agreement, it means reducing carbon emissions. It also means that there need to be carbon budgets for activities. And that question of carbon budget goes together with the question how much flying is actually still possible. Of course, that's kind of a question that is almost at the heart, at least implicitly, of a global alliance, such as the Alliance Culture for the Planet, which also relies to some degree on people flying in. Now, the good thing is that if there are some constraints in a carbon budget, it allows you to be somewhere in between 2 extremes. And the 2 extremes is I fly everywhere I can, and the other extreme is I don't fly at all anymore. Well, the answer is basically that if you have a carbon budget, you fly as much as your carbon budget allows you to fly. And that also has the advantage of making you choose very wisely where you go and why you go there if you have a limited amount of carbon available. And it also gives a little bit more of breathing space and liberty so that many people I know who if they have to step on a plane, they always do it with a bad conscience, that you no longer do it with a bad conscience because you know that it fits with your carbon commitments. And finally, the 7th highlight is perhaps one that was present subliminally throughout the day. It's a question, but we are so small, what can we change? What weight has the cultural sector? And there, I was inspired by Rachel O'Sullivan from the Royal Ballet and Opera just earlier in the online panel, who said that the one big advantage that almost no other sector has is the big and incredible reach of the cultural sector through the audience, through its public visibility. So while the first important step is to get the house in order internally, before you invite guests in at your home, usually clean up, make a good impression. The next step is really to reach out and to do this engagement. I think this is where the leverage is unprecedented. And this is also where the voice of the cultural sector also needs to be heard going forward. So with this, I'd like to almost wrap up the summit, but I think there's one important intervention that is still going to happen, because this masterclass came around through not only our own idea, but also through the input of the city of Lausanne and the cultural department who came up with this idea. So we are very grateful actually to them contributing to this and making this happen. And I'd like to pass the word to Isabel Gatica, who is the head of the cultural department.
So it's an honor for me to speak today on behalf of the city of Lausanne, and first of all, on behalf of our mayor, Grégoire Junot. I would like to thank the people that made this event possible, Professor Martin Müller and his team of the University of Lausanne, especially Zoe Bernet and Giovanna Nasrallah, my colleague Julien Gross, as well as the team of Grange de Dorigny, and many people that worked really hard on bringing us together today. This gathering is essential as it reminds us that culture is a space for creativity, sharing ideas, meeting one another, exchange, not only on the artistic side, but also with this common purpose that we share today. A common purpose, isn't it nice and refreshing in the world we live in? It was refreshing this morning to be able to connect to one another and share dreams and a common purpose, a common goal. Sharing projects, dreams, and also concrete ways to make these dreams come true, wasn't it? Sustainability must be a priority, and as we heard this morning, it goes far beyond the environment. It affects employment, the spaces we work in, and the communities we're part of. That's why we need to approach sustainability through a lens that includes not only environmental concerns, but also social dimensions. It's all connected. And we collectively share the responsibility to invent new ways of creating, producing, and sharing arts and culture in a way that is sustainable, but without sacrificing artistic ambition and experimentation. So it's a thin line. So how do we do it? I love the thought that Clémence shared this morning. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to start. So let's start. I'm very happy to share with you that the City of Lausanne is launching an ambition initiative with the help and support of the University of Lausanne's Center of Competence in Sustainability, Nelly Niwa, Julie Grishaber and the team. And we're just about to start a new sustainability strategy. We have two key goals. First, to define together a realistic action plan tailored to our territory. And second, to move concretely towards its testing and implementation. This strategy will be designed with and for our cultural institutions and our publics. And it's one of the key findings of this morning, as Martin mentioned, is we need to work also bottom up. And we will be implementing this strategy through a participatory process and bring together the artists and the institutions. Our ambition is clear: to encourage, support, and highlight the integration of sustainability principle in every dimension of Lausanne's cultural life, whether environmental, social, or governance. We are convinced that by working collectively in the spirit of open dialogue and debate that is one of the strengths of Switzerland, we can give Lausanne's cultural sector an active and exemplary role in the ongoing transition. So for the City of Lausanne, today marks the first step towards a very exciting project that could not have been possible without the University of Lausanne. Thank you to all the teams. Thank you so much to all of you for coming here and sometimes discovering our vibrant Lausanne for the first time. Thank you to everyone for participating to this event. Thank you for your ideas, your interventions. And let's keep our hopes, our dreams, our common goals, and see you very soon. Thank you.